Kia ora koutou, everyone. Thank you for participating in this webinar. My name's Danielle Tolson. I'm the Senior Investment Advisor for Grants and Subsidies. I have responsibility for this Injury Prevention Grants Program. Apologies for the slight delay in getting going. We had a couple of technical issues. So in terms of the housekeeping for that, can I please ask you all, if you've got your speaker going, to mute yourselves? That just helps with our reduction in background noise while we have the session. So the way that we're going to do things this morning is there's a session which we'll go through with some slides which I'll talk to. You can send questions through at any time and we'll go through those at the end of the presentation. To send your questions through, please use the chat function. Now you can find that if you go along the Zoom toolbar at the top, it's on the end of the right hand side. There's 3 dots with more. You go into the drop down and the chat is the first thing for you to be able to go into and type your questions. Now we do ask that everyone sends their questions to the everyone option. That's to stop duplication. If you do want to ask a question that's unique to your project, or you don't feel comfortable in terms of confidentiality asking it in this forum, you can send your question to our email address, which will be given at the end of the session. So bearing in mind with this presentation that it's an overview based on the applicant guidelines for doing your application, those guidelines are available on our webpage already, and I would refer you to those to use as the guidance for putting your application together. Okay, so first of all, why does this Workplace Injury Prevention Grant exist? It's an initiative that ACC launched earlier in 2019. We had one funding round already that was run in February, and so the successful applications from that were announced last month. The reasons that we've put this grant in place is that it's around co-investment funding to support people who are eligible to deliver initiatives that focus on improving injury prevention in New Zealand in a sustainable way. It allows us to partner with businesses and other groups to put health and safety improvements in place. The grant was put in place in response to a need and a want that we've recognised in our customers and discussions with them around getting rid of some of the barriers for improvement. So things around funding, working across the sector, being able to put new ideas in place, strengthening leadership. The model for the program is supported by international evidence, particularly in countries in the EU and other places like New Zealand, where there is only one accident insurance mechanism. And then for that third point, when we're talking about it's an ACC key lever, what we mean by that the grant is designed to be a catalyst for change through the effective investment and the support of others making an effort involved in workplace injury prevention. The focus for the Injury Prevention Grant is on medium to large businesses or collectives of organisations together, so more than a few organisations banding together for a project. It's designed to address problems that were identified around needing to strengthen industry and sector leadership in terms of health and safety and injury prevention in particular. It's focused around people working collaboratively on projects, shared outcomes and knowledge sharing, and it's around the financial barriers to being able to do some change. So what we're looking at in terms of the solutions we want out of the program are things that are unknown or quite complex, and things that have quite a broad or transformational impact. So we're looking at things that don't just change the situation for one organisation, but they can be shared out across different industries, sectors, and change across different areas of health and safety in the wider New Zealand experience. Now, the opportunity areas that have been identified for the Workplace Injury Prevention Grant are innovation, so that's opportunity to trial or support the integration of new technologies or methodologies into workplace health and safety. An example of that we funded in the first funding round was with Becker, the construction company, who are rolling out a virtual reality headset tool to do health and safety training across their sites in the construction industry. System capability and development is a big one. So that's the problems that have national or regional significance and impact and can be identified in a number of different places and industries. An example of that from the last funding round is the Food and Grocery Council have received support to implement some strong leadership practices in the retail supply chain. Now, the third opportunity is around applied research. So that's things that contribute to behaviour change and are sustainable, have reach, benefits and engage industry and workers. We haven't supported an applied research project yet, but an example of something that might be an opportunity there would be academics or other people with specialist knowledge working with industry around developing injury prevention resources for workers with a low literacy level. Now, in this current funding round, there are 2 specific investment priorities, and your application should speak to these. We're continuing with the sector leadership priority from the last funding round, and for that, you are required to lead and drive an improvement in workplace health and safety performance, and this is particularly in industries with high rates of injury. And ones we've identified this time around are manufacturing, transport and warehousing, agriculture, and commercial fishing. And the way that we want improvement to be implemented is through establishing and strengthening the capability of industry sector groups and collaborating with worker representatives at the group level so that that structure is sustainable for ongoing cooperation beyond the 3-year life of the grant. And that's a big one for us, is around the reach and the ability to continue with the improvements after your ACC funding relationship has concluded. The second priority for this round is Māori, Pacifica and migrant workers. What we're looking for there, because these workforces are overrepresented in statistics, is innovative solutions to improve their outcomes, focusing on the factors impacting those particular groups. No solutions need to be transferable across industries or sectors with a high proportion of their workforce in at least one of those prioritised work groups. So that could be something that you do in forestry, can be translated in a way to commercial fishing, for example. You need to be able to demonstrate how the project collaborates with workers, once again, like our sector leadership needing our workforce involvement. And here we're looking at workers and other stakeholders being involved right from the beginning of the project, so the scoping and design of the idea through to the implementation of the project, and being involved in the project management and governance side of things as well. And for Māori and Pacifica and migrant workers, we are also looking that you can display in the project a strong cultural context. Now this next slide is the front page of ARCUS, which is the online application tool where you will need to submit your application. And the first thing we're looking at there is around your eligibility to apply for the funding. And if you look at those points there with yes and no, for your application to be eligible, you will need to be able to answer confidently yes to every one of those questions. And this is the point, I think, where when you're putting your application together or deciding if you are going to go through with the application process, this is the point where you can decide if this grant is for you in terms of your eligibility. And you should be aware, even if you do put the application through, that one of the first parts of our administration processing for the grant is that we run another check against the eligibility. So the grants are assessed by a group of subject matter experts using this criteria and these weightings in the project. So when you're putting your application together, and I do stress again to look at the applicant guidelines, because all of this is far more detailed in there when you're putting your application together, is around the project description section of the application. So strategic alignment, the things that we're talking about, the problems, opportunities, benefits, the fact that we're looking for collaboration, and the reach, so the information sharing and lessons learned kind of things that you can translate, which are also part of your knowledge transfer. And I'll speak a little bit more about that further down the line. So that's information sharing, lessons learned, and how you work with the sector to share the benefits of the project. The third thing, funding milestone and governance, is pretty standard funding application things around your budget, how you've scoped your project out, milestones and timelines for the particular bits of the project that are key areas and that you can sign off. Governance, looking at things like project management, planning and oversight to get the project through to completion. So one of the questions we get asked is, can accredited employer program members apply for the grants? The answer to that is yes. If you are an AEP member, you can apply for the grant, but you need to be able to demonstrate that the project will strengthen wider sector leadership and benefits for workplaces and workers across a whole industry or supply chain. So an example is one of the projects we've just recently funded was a collective from Auckland, Hutt Valley and Hawke's Bay DHBs, who are all AEP members, but their project is around implementing better health and safety training and practice for their contractors and subcontractors across those sites, which both means that there's better health and safety practice in their own sites, but also the other places those contractors and subcontractors are working also benefit. And those people are not necessarily AEP members. So it needs to have that wider reach. So ARCUS, as I've mentioned, is the online application tool. A couple of housekeeping things around this. You will be able to access it at 12 p.m. on Thursday, this coming Thursday, when the grants round opens. But to do that, you will need to complete a registration process, and this includes existing users of ARCUS. But you won't be able to get in and have a look at that until Thursday at 12 o'clock. We will be putting up a video that takes you step by step through ARCUS, which will be on our webpage. And the other thing is, within the applicant guidelines, there is also a step-by-step section on going through the ARCUS form that will help you put your application together in a technical way. So getting back to the knowledge transfer plan, with that we are looking at all those things in the circle there, but what we're looking for in particular is creating awareness of the project out in the world, sharing new knowledge and lessons learnt, how the project will contribute to changes in policy and practice in health and safety and injury prevention, and how behaviour change can be supported and influenced through your project. And there's detailed stuff in the applicant guidelines around your knowledge transfer plan. Broadly speaking, a project that has a successful knowledge plan section will have allocated specific project budget and detailed delivery to the knowledge transfer aspect. And this can include things like producing promotional material, how you engage with other people in the sector to ensure they know about the project and its intended outcomes, and demonstrating that you are actively willing to provide advice and support to people who want to do similar initiatives. Another important part of this is showing how you're going to collect and share data as part of that improvement opportunity. So a less successful knowledge transfer plan would be one that wasn't very clear, hadn't allocated any or very limited budget to the transfer activity, and where there wasn't a lot of transfer activity planned. So as part of the funding for your project, ACC may provide up to 80% of the total project cost. Applicants need to show how they will contribute 20%. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to be just you as the applicant organisation. It can be other project partners or sponsors for what you're doing. And your 20% can be made up of cash and or in-kind contributions, which are materials, equipment, services and personnel. So an example of how you can have an in-kind personnel cost would be if there was a project manager donating a few hours to the project, showing what the hourly rate would be in terms of that donation, or if you were going to pay for it in real money, and you should include the dollar amount for the in-kind cost as part of your budget. So this next slide is around intellectual property. I know it's quite detailed, but this is one of the most frequently asked questions we've had arising from the first funding round that we've done for injury prevention grants, and also in the lead up to this one. Just to note here, the point around all documents forming the application will, when delivered to ACC, become the property of ACC. What that means is, because ACC is a government organisation, anything included in your application is subject to the Official Information Act. So that's something to bear in mind there. So I'll just leave that slide up for a couple of minutes so that you can read through, because there is a lot of detail. So here we're looking at the timeline for the injury grant program process for this round. So the round opens on Thursday, this coming Thursday at 12 o'clock, where you can access the ARCIS portal to make your application. You have 6 weeks to submit your application, and it closes at 5 o'clock on Thursday the 10th of October. Following that, there'll be a couple of weeks where we here at ACC go through the admin and application processing stage. Applications are then allocated to assessors who are subject matter experts selected on their knowledge of what the project's trying to do in terms of sector or particular aspects and how it relates to their priorities. Assessors are given 3 weeks to review and score the applications. We then do a moderation process, finalising the scores and going through to those projects that are successful and will be offered a grant. All applicants, unsuccessful and successful, will be notified of the funding decision by the 12th of December, and people who have been made an offer of funding will enter into discussions with us and then the funding agreement process after that, with completion date by the 7th of February so that they can commence their projects for 2020. So now we'll go on to the questions and answers. So if you want to send your questions through the chat to everyone. And these are our contact details. I'll leave them up while we're just putting the questions and answers together. You can email us if you've got specific questions at that injury prevention grants address. There's the link to the ARCIS system, which opens on Thursday at 12. And there's our website address. On that page, you'll find there will be a recording of the webinar with the FAQs included. You will find the detailed applicant guidelines, and you'll find some advice around going into ARCIS. So I'll leave that screen up now. I'm going to mute myself, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes just with any Q&As. Hi again, everyone. Thank you for sending these things through. Some really good questions here, which I'm going to speak to. So the first there is, can we apply for more than one project? And if you do you have to do a separate application per project? The answers are yes, you can apply for more than one thing, but you do need to do a separate application per project. That's just the way that ARCIS works and the way that our processing works. You're assessed on the project. Okay, supplying financial statements of the company. You don't need to provide that in your application, you just need to do a project budget. If you are made an offer of grant though, one of the things that we do at ACC is due diligence on your company, so you would need to supply us with whatever financial statements we request at that stage if you get there. No, and it's not only companies with less than 100 employees can apply, like I said before, it's around medium to large businesses. So Srikanth has asked, can we have a list and description of grant applications in healthcare from the first round so that you're not applying for the same? You can see, Srikanth, the successful grants have been published. There is healthcare in there. We don't give a list and description of all grant applications, so things that were unsuccessful or turned down because of eligibility criteria, those details remain confidential here to us. But you can see the successful healthcare or healthcare related projects that we are supporting. Okay, David has asked, should we use the charge out rates for staffing as given in the guideline? The things in the guideline are just really given as examples. When you're putting your budget together, you should use the actual costs related to you and your project. Next question, no, there isn't a limit to the size of the application pack. You'll see when you go into ARCIS that there's very specific questions there with dialogue boxes, and there's also the capacity for you to add up to 3 attachments. Okay, so Rachel has asked, I expect an ROI of the project needs to be clearly highlighted. When we're talking about return on investment, you can ask for a data request from ACC if you want to have that kind of information. It's not stuff that we put out particularly because hopefully everybody's heard me. We just had a bit of interference there. I can go back and answer the last couple of questions if people do want that, if you were tuned out by that beeping noise. So getting back to the question around return on investment, there is a section that if you look at the guidelines around what we expect for ROI, but if you want things to do with ACC in respects to certain demographics, sectors, etc., you can put a data request into us because of the depth and breadth of that kind of information. We don't have every scenario available easily, but you can ask for particular things from us. Okay, if successful with a grant, is there any maximum restriction on commencement date in 2020? So i.e. 3 months after? No, we're quite flexible around it. The grant is for 3 years from your start date to your completion date, but we'll work together with you in discussions around the funding offer to set dates and things that work for you if you are offered a grant. So that seems to be it from the questions. I'll just take the chat box out and put the slide back up for you to see. Oh no, one more. Okay, high-tech. We have a high-tech project in the pipeline, but already implemented in the industry elsewhere by another company. Are we still eligible? Your eligibility is based on that criteria. If it was a duplication of the same project, you would, or the same use of technology, you would need to speak very clearly around how you speak to what we're asking with the investment priorities, criteria, and the things around this grant in particular if you were to make an application. So I hope that answers that question. Yeah, the other option for you with that one is that you could also work with the other company as a partner, and that is one thing. If there are 2 similar applications coming through and around that we do want to support, we would also have conversations with the parties around partnering. So I hope that's answered your questions there. I'll put that down so anyone can note the contact details if they need to. Okay, so right. I hope the session's been helpful. Like I say, there'll be a recording of the webinar and all of the questions and answers available before Thursday, and the other information that you need to put your application is together on the website. Okay, thank you for your time today, everyone. Have a good day.